August the 26th, 2024. I'm going to be your host. My apologies. I had a little bit of a rough time there getting a stream. I actually had to start a new session. I can't remember the last time I was forced to do that. But it worked, and that's all that matters. I'll look tomorrow. I don't know what happened, so I know we're streaming. Now it says no data. No data. Oh, there it is. Show me some data. Anyway, it looks like we're going to be streaming in a moment. My apologies for anybody that's waiting. You can call in at 709-589-4406. I forgot to plug the external in, so booyah. Let's just give me a second here. Always something with Dana. Dana's always got to screw something up. Okay, I think we're back in business. Let's bring up the poll. The best way to find out if we're back in business is to bring up the poll. I changed the mouse. Mouse was giving me a hard time. And I got the wrong mouse. It's a really small mouse and it doesn't like me at all. But it's definitely better than the other mouse. Should cowardly nuclear scientists work at Fukushima nuclear meltdowns instead of the homeless? Is that a crime? That nuclear scientists should work at Fukushima instead of the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language? Is that crazy talk? Let me see here. Tepco locates $500 million US dollars to compensate reputational damage. What are they talking about? Did Fukushima have a tsunami? Let me see. I do believe that's a tsunami. The cover story's been ongoing. Look, this is March the 21st, so this is 10 days after the tsunami. 10 days after that, they said they're still having problems getting enough power to run crucial machinery. After connecting power lines, they connected power lines. This is 1,200 miles, not kilometers, but miles of the coastline. Up to 10 kilometers inland. And so when you look at the site, how are you going to connect power to reactors that essentially don't exist anymore? So the cover story was right away. So let's find out what the crazies are talking about. And Reuters, of course, which is CIA, and so is Associated Press. And they have around 3,000 medias worldwide that will just, the spider bots will aggregate whatever story it is, propaganda it is. Reputational damage, you say? They show you this picture. So, reputational damage from discharging water. Wait a second, let's look at the picture. So this is 2011. So what they're saying is nothing got out until last year. That's the official story. And that's why they hate me so much. And they do hate me. My goodness, they hate on me. So far, to compensate businesses hurt by boycotts. Boycotts. Triggered by Tepco's discharge. And this is meant to promote the tritium fable of radioactive treated. That's another fable of treated. And we'll get to that. Radioactive water from Fukushima nuclear power plant. So this was reactor 3. This was 190 feet tall. It's 150 feet wide. So it's hard when you look at a building that looks like this to get the scale, right? And actually, I do got a picture there. So this is taller. That is taller than that part right there. This part here. And this is 1/4 of the size of the building. So what this is for reactor one, they're going to build he built a Kevlar sarcophagus. Just big, a really expensive canvas, basically. Bulletproof canvas at that. Around reactor one. That was to hide it from the media and hide it from you. And so you can see a person right there. That'll give you an idea how big we're talking about. And so reactor 3 is actually gone. Anyway, let's not talk about important stuff. Let's just talk about their stuff. China and Russia have banned seafood imports from Japan over the safety concerns that Tokyo has said are scientifically unjust. So China and Russia are working with, because they're pro-nuclear as you can get, right? And so the idea is to get you to protest about tritium as of August the 24th of last year. But there is no models of tritium in radioactive fallout, but we have models of all the other isotopes. This is a xenon-133 plume after 20 days. Of course, this is absurd to suggest that that's all there was. So this was 450,000 times above detection levels and persisted for weeks. So because xenon-133 has such a short half-life, for it to persist for weeks, you're talking about China syndromes and ongoing criticalities and nuclear meltdowns that can't be extinguished. They don't need oxygen, right? And so that was a United States study. But these were models. Different institutions have put out models showing the plume model based on Tepco's numbers, which were flawed numbers. I apologize for slurping and these sensitive microphones. I got back last night and I was awake for 32 hours straight. I guess it was more than that, but I didn't sleep the night before. I was up. I worked all day to put everything together, get the bikes on the trailer. We'll show you those pictures in the next couple of days, maybe tomorrow, or at least the next day anyway. And it was depressing not to go find any species. There was no flocks of birds on the highway. There was no... covered 86 kilometers on the trails in the middle of nowhere. In a provincial park on top of that, right? And I've seen a few insects in a couple of spots, but there was no insects hitting the windshield or my helmet, for instance, right? It was dismal. There was no... there's no life. There's just a bare minimum of life now after Fukushima 13 years later. And there was it opened up a whole bunch of other things I got to go investigate over this week. And I got to do that whole coastline, I guess. It's a better way to do it. And when you see the map coming up in another month or something, of all the areas I covered this year, coastlines and communities and that, it's shocking that there's no life. It's shocking. And then the pictures from the day before, or 2 days before yesterday, which was Friday, yeah. We got to show them at the same time. We've got a lot of stuff to catch up to, and thrilled that we got that accomplished, and we'll get this up. Either tomorrow or next day, we'll start going meandering through this huge amount. It wasn't 900 pictures on Friday; it was 1,600 pictures that I got. There was about 100 pictures I took of an albino, I think it was a mink. I never looked at the pictures yet. It looked to be an albino mink. I've never seen an albino mink before here on this coastline. Fukushima, let's go back to the story. So we're only covering one story tonight. Just this one story. Reputational damage. Fukushima operator Tepco has vowed to compensate domestic businesses which suffer a fall in export due to the bans. Incredibly evil, this industry worldwide. We see the same thing. But Japan takes it to another level. And I believe that, my personal opinion, right, is that Japan should be nuked before it destroys every species on the planet. Tepco began. Now this is 2011 picture. There's no building. So they're saying nothing got out despite the fact that the building is actually gone. 450,000 times above detection levels just of the Xenon 133. The University of Texas researcher began releasing treated radioactive water is what they're saying last August. August 24th in particular, 2023 is what they're last August. But if you go to 2012, so last August, they're talking about August the 24th. Just bear with me, I'll dig up another facet. And some of the work I had done for the night got lost. I had to do a whole new session. And because the equipment I'm using is really sophisticated equipment. Typically just mainstream media is the only people that can afford to use that kind of equipment, right? It's very difficult equipment, by the way, to learn to use. We've mastered it. Thank goodness I got that particular equipment because they would have just destroyed everything. And there was a year and a half before that, they had killed 10 computers on me. Or 9 computers, whatever it was. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Japan's National Cancer Center says the number of patients rose by 865,000 extra cancers in 2012. So why are they talking about reputational damage when in the first year there was 865,000 extra cancers? And so then the fishermen and the farmers and everybody that is still harming people, well, these are serial killers. That's what a fisherman in Japan or a farmer in Japan is. They're serial killers. So all that farmland, all those farmers, there should be, like a responsible country turn around and nuke these places so they don't destroy humanity. Because they're shipping radioactive food and murdering you from your supermarkets, and the world is just too complacent, too lulled into too much fucking fluoride in their water and their toothpaste and everything else. You can actually buy baby's milk with fluoride, and imagine wrapping your mind around that statement. So how can you have 800? Now, not everybody got health care, right? Not everybody was diagnosed. How can you have a spike of 865,000 extra cancer patients where there's never happened before? Just like, there's almost another million cancer patients this year, folks. Buy shares in the deadly radioactive industry because that's how they're going to get rid of anybody with cancer is radiation, right? So in 2012, there was also 13,646 children out of 38,000 children that had thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters or so. And a child's thyroid is only 2 by 3 centimeters, and that makes the hormones for their body, so you got radioactive hormones. And then when you see numbers like this, now pre-Fukushima was 1 to 2 per million at best. So when you see numbers like this, that means they're also making radioactive stem cells because a lot of the radiation ends up in the skeleton. And think about this statement in 2011. the same year, in November, the same year. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will leak out about Fukushima. And that's a pun. I mean, 865,000 extra cancers. That came out a few months later. And cancer is not the only illness. There's heart and liver and lung and respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's a huge list of diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest in increments forever. It'll never go away. Radiation never goes away. And if they cremate you after you die, then you liberate the radiation back into the ecosystem to harm something else. Every time there's a forest fire, you liberate the radiation sequestered in there from the last 80 years. You can't destroy it. So it has conducted several discharges from the plant. Well, clearly the plant hasn't stopped discharging from day one. The buildings were completely destroyed. I showed you that earlier. The world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. You'll see that in almost every media will describe it that way. And what they decided to do was, you got 4 reactors with 32 reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings, all gone. So 4 reactor cores, 3 were running, 1 was in maintenance, which means over half the reactor core was still in the reactor, because you never empty the reactor core. It never happens. And for maintenance, right? So that meant over half, well, 3/4 of the reactor core was in the core at reactor 4. And then at the fuel pools, because you don't have a repository anymore in Japan, they were stuffed. And so we're going to downplay it and say there was only 32 reactor cores in these 40-year-old reactor buildings. They were 40 years old at that time. So each reactor core is equal to 100 Chernobyls. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Chernobyl was a tiny reactor. And so clearly Fukushima is the world's worst nuclear disaster. And now, if you go officially, Chernobyl is still the world's worst nuclear disaster, which is disappointing because it means that every nuclear scientist is a degenerate scumbag. Is just the lowest form of life imaginable because they haven't spoken out. They did on the opposite. They come out and lied to you, didn't they? We've been covering it since it happened, so we've covered all of them. And the biggest liars originally was Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford University, Oxford University, MIT University, UC Berkeley, University of California University. And I took their presentations, their original presentations on Fukushima, and I'm going to do it again. And we went through the whole videos. But now we have the luxury of hindsight. We're going to do it again because they took down my other sites, so those presentations don't exist anymore. And they deserve to be there. Tepco's representative executive vice president, Yamaguchi, is he related to Mary Yamaguchi, I wonder? Well, foreign governments continue to suspend imports to Japanese fishery products since last year. The idea is to promote tritium. So we're going to ban the food. They're releasing radiation to the ocean. They're talking about the water, the fake story. You can't filter this water, see? And you can't put it in tanks. It's 2.2 sieverts a liter. And so if you just only look at beta, then you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts in a tank. That's being very conservative. So think about it, you're pouring water over a melted reactor core. It's the reactor core. It's melted down. Now it's called a corium. The biggest byproduct of the radiative fuel, even before it melts down, is curium isotopes. Once it melts down, it's horrifying. And so if you take this water and you put it in a tank, well, the fuel particulates, the fuel particulates, the fuel itself, are going to fall down on the bottom where you got neutrons and betas and alphas and gammas and x-rays going on. That's going to be criticality and burn a hole through the tank like we've seen at Hanford, like we've seen in Moyak. It's simply how it works. And so you can't put this stuff in a tank. And you can't put it in a filter because you put it in a filter, you're going to have a criticality in the filter. You're going to, because you can't separate neutrons and betas and gammas and alphas. It can't be done like in these conditions. Let alone, I don't even think it can be done. Tepco will continue to work to increase consumption of the radioactive food product. Well, we've never stopped, right? So they want you to believe that they got it under control. And Tepco, of course, is just an operator. Now, they don't make reactors. They don't make the fuel. They have no right to be on the site. They're the last people that should be on the site. They have a long legacy of being degenerate monsters. Now they're the ultimate degenerate monsters. And so they want you to blame Tepco instead of the nuclear industry, which allowed them and helped them, including particularly the International Atomic Energy Agency, to perpetrate these crimes against humanity and the species. It provided no annual forecast, citing uncertainty over when its flagship, which is up by the Noto Peninsula, Ishikawa Prefecture, nuclear power station will restart, which is the biggest reactor site on the planet, right? Which is on an earthquake fault line, and right next to it there was 5,900 houses that floundered, that became unstable due to liquefaction from a significant earthquake that they helped cover up the significance of in January the 1st of this year, which we covered for 31 days because of the Shika reactor. They had made claims that they had a 7 out of a 7 earthquake in the basement of the Reactor 1 building at the Shika nuclear power plant, which was closed down since 2011, but had around 8 reactor cores stored in the fuel pool at the top of this building. And this was a fault line that's 3,000 to 4,000 years old that erupted. And it hasn't erupted for its date. What they figured geologically was 3,000 to 4,000 years. It was like 1,600 landslides, and the list goes very long. And the significance of it is we covered it extensively because they didn't show us any pictures of the Shika community where they admit it was a 7 out of a 7 earthquake. And then there was a media that went allegedly to the Shika nuclear plant, but only showed us the tops of the buildings, never showed us the site. Why would they do that, see? You got nothing to hide, why are you doing that? And then there was 100 miles of the coastline was risen up 13 to 14 feet permanently. And that was part of the Shika site itself. And so, like, when that coastline lifted up 13 to 14 feet, it's not just like there's a thin line of the coastline just rises up. That's the whole coastline. And this is what caused ruptures, and they were up to 150 miles long across the Noto Peninsula on the Ishikawa Prefecture. And to this day, we still haven't got evidence of the Shika community's damage. There was like 2 pictures that came out that they said was Shika, and the damage was unbelievable. Where telephone poles were doing this instead of that, right? They were on both sides of the road. And because I never got no sleep last night, or the night before, all I done like last night, I just slept right up till 9 o'clock this morning. It was unbelievable. And then, like I don't remember anything. And then I slept twice more today, and I still just burnt out. And I can't remember the last time when I was determined to accomplish it because of the weather. I had a weather factor. I'm traveling a very long distance, and I need good weather to pull off what I pulled off. And we're going to show you all of that coming up. In fact, we're going to jump back to die-off shows for the rest of the week because that's the only way we can put out the rest of this information that we gathered up. It's a ridiculous amount, so if I let you gather up, you know what happens, right? It becomes overwhelming. And this is an emergency. We need to have a conversation. We have the evidence. Tepco began releasing treatise. What they're talking about is an ALP system. So this story came out February 11, 2013. a month before the second anniversary. These images were released by the press pool, showed the current conditions of the Fukushima Daiichi, and some of these were like flyover shots around the tanks and other stories. They had 1,000 tanks, by the way, in 2013. They got 1,000 tanks today. So this is 2013 in February. The ELP system. ELP's decontamination system under construction. So go read this story, August 9, 2014. Fukushima contaminated water problems worsen. The disaster site has struggled with water decontamination for years. Well, it doesn't have any filtration system. It was, the year before that, it was building the ELP system, right? And just announced recently, they think they finally have the ELP's decontamination system operational. But that was a conjecture. That was an opinion that by the end of the year, right? And so the end of the year was a very long. It was basically 2015 that they alleged that they had it working. But the problem with the ELP system, same with the Riva system, the series system, and that, is that you can't filter radioactive water once it's poured over the reactor core because the pipes are too radioactive to step over. And that's forever, by the way. Once you stop, if you drain the pipes, the hoses, and you bring them and plant and bury them in a sidewalk, everybody walks on the sidewalk is going to die that week. They're radioactive forever in extreme doses. You can't filter it because all the atoms are the same size. So it doesn't matter if it's the atom of a, like, of anything, of any species or any flora or fauna or whatever. The atoms are always the same size. So you can't filter one and not filter the other ones. It doesn't work that way. It's not like you're shifting dirt with a shifter and bigger rocks will stay in the screen, but the smaller stuff will filter through it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about physical atoms. So the atoms of the water are the same size as the atoms from radiation isotopes, from the uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and that. In other words, you can't filter it. Explosion at Fukushima can only have been caused by a meltdown of the reactor core. And these explosions weren't hydrogen explosions, they were steam explosions from water coming in contact with once the reactors melted down, they evaporated any water that was there. When you reintroduce water back in, the water expands to 1,800 feet or something per liter. And this is what caused the explosions. So clearly, reactor 4 over to your left and reactor 3 behind me is 2 of the 4 buildings that melted down. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest the common span fuel pool melted down. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest reactor 6 melted down. This is Arne Gunnarsson. And now Arne made the racks for the fuel assemblies for the fuel pools. So the racks are what holds the reactor cores. And the reactor cores are described as assemblies, and each assembly has around 100 fuel rods into it. Each rod is 12 feet long and weighs 18 pounds. And they're stored at the top of the building in the fuel pool. Now, I put that picture, those 2 pictures there, because that's the picture Arne was promoting for Reactor 4, but that's what Reactor 4 actually looked like. And that part of the building was 4 times the height of this stump that should have been raised all the way to the ground, right? So let's talk about another facet of this. Average absorbed doses to the red bone marrow for adults in Fukushima prefectures, excluding the evacuation zone. And this was United Nations UNSCLEAR, United Nations Scientific Community on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, which, why are we listening to these? This is a corporation. It's like McDonald's dictating what your children should wear to school every day. Why would you give them any street creds for? And they're the opposite of what they're supposed to be. Their job is to cover it up. And here they are. United Nations finds no adverse health effects from Fukushima. This was on the 10th anniversary, 2021. So the average disposition density of cesium-137 on soil, becquerels per square meter. So the first line is the community, the next line is the population in the community, and this line right here is the becquerels per square meter of just cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet every second. So if every square meter is pulsing energy 600 feet, so like for instance, right down here, you got 230 million pulses of cesium-137 for 600 feet in every square meter. But all these square, it's not like a square meter here and a square meter over there. It's every square meter. And so to only acknowledge cesium-137 is absurd. It's their confidence that the average person doesn't have the willpower or the competence to flush out the reality of what's going on there. Because the biggest byproduct of radiative fuel rods, for starters, is curium isotopes, which need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. But if you're going to find cesium-137 after a nuclear accident, you're going to find curium, you're going to find uranium, you're going to find plutonium, and americium, neptunium, strontium, and 1,000 other fission products in the same sample. So to suggest that only 137, which is, you'll see that if you hang around this side at all, those connotations, which is pure propaganda to suggest that it's only 137. In fact, in a normal world, that would be discredited, right? All academics would come out and say, this is crazy to suggest anyone. Instead, every academic comes out and says the same thing. So it's frightening that there's an industry that hates your guts and hates the species and have done everything in their enormous capacity to destroy your health and the species and the future of humanity. Wrap your mind around that statement. So no adverse health effects on scumbag Yahoo. Of course, this is ludicrous because you're talking about huge numbers per square meter. These communities clearly should be evacuated. And yet, here they were experts, UN experts. And so who gives a shit about UN? They're a military-industrial complex. There are 195 militaries. They have no sovereignty over any country. They can't impose any penalty on anybody because they're a corporation like McDonald's. Why is the world treating them as if they're somehow an authority of all things? They're the furthest thing from an authority. And the proof is in headlines like this. How can you suggest that there's going to be no adverse effects from massive radiation doses per square meter in that whole prefectures? Fukushima radiation did not harm the population's health. I showed you earlier there was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. And so this is 2021. So to suggest that that didn't get caused by Fukushima, well, what did cause the spike? Incredible, unbelievable, unprecedented spike in cancers. Not we're just looking at cancers. So when you start looking at all these towns and all these people in the communities, and you look at the radiation, like, let me look for a number. So you see 89,663 atoms per square meter. Well, 85 atoms was an evacuation zone at a nuclear power plant pre-Fukushima. Now 89,663 atoms is who cares? And this is simply untenable. It's impossible not to get sick. And it's not just cancer, but there's obviously, there's so much cancer, it's so heartbreaking to see the world, a single industry ruin everything forever. Because radiation never goes away. And then to see no pushback. See all the bloggers out there screaming about nonsense? It's horrifying. Let's keep her going here. And I wasn't going to do a show tonight because I was I'm still kind of stunned from yesterday. That freaked me out. And then there's just not getting no sleep for 2 days. And I was like, if I don't do a show tonight, first off, the nuclear industry wins. And they're busy attacking me. My goodness. But see, the truth is stronger than anything, you know. I knew over a decade ago, when I came out publicly, I've been at this for 22 years, but when I came out publicly over a decade ago, I knew that was the end of me, because they would attack me relentlessly every day for the rest of my life. And I don't have a reputation. They've got that completely destroyed. I'm literally considered a monster by the average person, because this industry is really good at that. But what they don't count on is that I have the moral high ground and a responsibility. And so I ain't going anywhere. They can attack me all they want. But ultimately, the world will come to the realization, and this industry will be held very accountable. I can guarantee it. So you see all these communities to your left. There's the populations, that row right there. And this is the numbers per square meter of just cesium-137. These are all evacuation zones, but they kept the people there. And they study them like they're actual human lab rats. UN finds no adverse health effects from Fukushima disaster 2021. And the reality of it was nothing but constant bombardment of health effects. UN finds no adverse health effects. And so all the media came out on the 10th anniversary, and they regurgitated United Nations narrative assertion that there was no adverse effects from a nuclear meltdown is the very reason they got to go. They're the worst thing that can happen to a planet. And what happens if we find another planet? They're going to destroy it too. Immediately too, on top of that. Average disposition density. Look at all these communities. Yet, here's the screaming media out there saying there is no damage. But yet, it's impossible not to have any damage. And that the fact that United Nations done that is disgustingly... I really don't know how to explain how hideous it is. We don't have any, I don't have anything to compare it to. There's nothing that we got as evil as what the industry has got done and continues to do. Like, growing 1 billion pounds in those 14 radioactive prefectures, 14 billion pounds of radioactive food being shipped worldwide each year. My goodness, you know. How do we get that evil? Well, nuclear. The nuclear has never been held accountable, so every year got a little bit eviler. And so after 70 years and Fukushima happened, it just kicked into overdrive. And now we're 13 years down the road, and their level of evil is just, it's unbelievable. So if they got everybody sick on the planet and everybody's too weak to fight back, I guess. Astronomical amount of radiation found in downtown Tokyo. Astronomical. This is TV. Directly outside the government's building, horrific readings where kids were playing in Fukushima. Extreme levels found where food is grown for elementary school lunches. What year was that? It doesn't say. Scientists, the West Coast bird die-off is the biggest ever recorded. The stomachs are completely empty. So they're emaciated. They starved to death. Their stomachs are completely empty. It's staggering and alarming and not heard of. Never seen anything like it. And it's unprecedented in scope and size. Unprecedented in scope and size. And they say the death could reach many hundreds of thousands. It was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. So when Tepco locates $500 million to compensate reputational damage, so it's meant so the fisherman doesn't lose hope, and the same they're doing the same thing with the farmers in all these nuclear wastelands. They picked up 30 million 1 tons of bags of radiation. So this is not a fiction. This is not he said, she said. West Coast bird die-off is biggest ever recorded. Ongoing fish famine. So you had a West Coast bird die-off all the way from New Mexico to Alaska, the entire continental shelf. Showing up emaciated by the millions. You have an ongoing fish famine on the U.S. West Coast. I was out on research expeditions doing radio shows. So a lot of this, that period for 6 years, the only person out there reporting was me. I was the guy who was on the ocean. I was the guy documenting the whole coastline. And so where were they getting the evidence if it wasn't for me? The dearth of food across the oceans, a severe fishery implosion, and supply has been low since 2011. And so all of these adverse conditions we're seeing, like these, the extreme temperatures, the extreme heat in the oceans, the extreme typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes, the extreme die-offs, the extreme, is all of that is post-Fukushima, since Fukushima. And so not putting Fukushima into the equation is despicable, to say the least. Officials blast Japan's government over Fukushima, such immoral people. They let the radioactive substances flow out freely and said nothing while contaminating the ocean is just absurd. And now they're trying to cover the whole thing up. That's 2013? Yeah, 2013. But here they are, they're locating $500 million, not to compensate for reputational damage, but to keep the fishermen in business. So they keep gathering up radioactive food to poison more people worldwide. That's exactly what's going on. And you're in the most radioactive place in human history, period, is Japan and its coastline. The whole ocean is radioactive now because of 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, but this pulse event from Japan, where you had a total of 36 reactor cores melt down at the one time. And these are huge reactor cores. Each core is equal to at least 100 Chernobyls because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, and it was a new one, a small one. Highly radioactive sewage. And I don't mention this enough. I do mention it quite a bit, but it's never enough, I don't think. The significance of this stuff here. So 30 miles from the plant to sewage was 334,000 atoms per kilogram. And whether you want to admit it or not, it's not unusual for a person to excrete a kilogram during a trip to the bathroom. And so there's no way they're not going to have debilitating health conditions. And radiation doesn't just drop dead. And you see a lot of the trolls used to show up in the comment section. Well, I don't see people dropping dead everywhere, Dana. But the reality of it is there's people dropping dead everywhere. It's highly radioactive sewage found 30 plus miles from Fukushima. Cesium levels up to 330. So this goes all the way past Tokyo. The same narrative. And in Tokyo, what we're seeing and surrounding places, the metropolitan Tokyo, 36 million people, was the sewage, because they dehydrate the sewage, right? They evaporate the water from the sewage, which means you're releasing a huge amount of radiation back into the ecosystem, because you can't destroy it. But they couldn't get rid of, in the first year, there was 50,000 one-ton bags of sewage that was dehydrated that they couldn't get rid of because it's so radioactive. I'm sorry, that was sediment from the freshwater filtration systems, right? It was 50 million one-ton bags. Sewage was obviously infinitely more than that. So they couldn't get rid of the sewage because it's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the sediment from the water filtration facilities because that's too radioactive. They can't get rid of the ashes from the incinerators because that's too radioactive. I mean, that is hell. That's the definition of hell, because you can't you can't smell it or see it or hear it or feel it or touch it or taste it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. And so it destroys the integrity of your immune system because your body attacks every atom, anthropogenic man-made atom, with white blood cells for the rest of your life, non-stop every second for the rest of your life. And what that means is for every white blood cell, or insect or bird or mammal or animal or whatever, every white blood cell that we produce is displacing a red blood cell. And the red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. So there is a significant cause and effect that is recognized in the academic world of, this is why we have the linear no threshold, because there is a cause and effect. So if you put a single atom, you put 200 million on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But this stuff is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, so it really matters. And so if you take that atom now, you multiply it by 2.2 billion times because of its toxicity, where it pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. So it's wrecking chromosomes and DNA cells all over your body. Your body tries to repair that every second. It can't keep up with that because then there's another pulse a second later. Your body has to repair all the damage from that, but at the same time, it has to attack the source. And so the more you get in you, the more white blood cells you're producing, the less red blood cells. Eventually, they call that leukemia, right? More white blood cells than red blood cells. So you become very lethargic. Your body can't fight off flus or viruses because your immune system now is 100% compromised. And so when it comes to insects and birds and mammals and animals, the significance of that is 1,000,000 times more harmful. So it sterilizes all the insects and birds. And then the birds, of course, which need, and we got studies there about how many, I can't remember the statistics. It was 5.5 million insects were caught by birds, and it was like 27 nests. They had around 3 or 4 fledglings each, and they caught 5.7 million birds or insects to feed the 27 nests of fledglings. So if you wipe out the insect, the birds go right away too. And then lucky for me, I'm a pack rat, and I save everything. It's like absurd. It's absurd. So let me just explain this to you. So the reactors really did blow up, even though officially these never blown up. Officially, they don't look like this. But if you go to Tepco, you can still find website. You'll still find those pictures. But officially, this never happened. Now, as of last year, United Nations came up with their new story. In 2020, there was hundreds of thousands, but it turned out to be millions. This was some of the first reports right here. A massive migratory. These were insect-eating birds. It was 192 species. And they were extremely emaciated. 192 species. There was millions of them. And they were dropping dead everywhere. Because they had no fat reserves, no muscle mass. And it was as if they were flying until they couldn't fly anymore. 192 species of insect eaters dropped dead in just a couple of week period. And it was over a very large area. And shortly after this story broke a few days later, and we covered it, that like 6 days straight or something, the media started saying they tried to blame it on coal, they were trying to blame it on forest fires. Like this was the middle of summer, right? And you're not going to have massive forest fires in the dead of winter, for instance, right? Perpetual lies. This is the worst thing can happen to a planet, and it's already happened to us. So again, let me come back here for 1 second. Just want to grab that story that we're talking about. What? Right there. Now, see, unfortunately, like, I had a show ready to go, and some of it did show up, stay there, but a lot of it didn't. I had to start a new session, which is like a traumatic experience for me, because it's so hard. I've done it so much over the years, I'm getting pretty good at it. So Tepco allocates $500 million to compensate, this is US dollars, to compensate reputational damage. Reputational damage. So they're saying that never happened, right? They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Now there's about 1,000 pictures available of the one-ton bags, but there was 149,000 sites. And what I mean by that is, now the pictures I'm going to show you are pictures that I made, because there's 149,000 pictures missing. And so I made around 2,400, and I have around 2,000 of them uploaded at my website, which I still haven't got back and fixed, but those pictures are available on the front page and those stories. You open up each of those stories. So, let me find another set of pictures, actually. So 150,000 sites like you're looking at right now. Now these are ones that I created to help articulate the 30 million one-ton bags, because there's 150,000 sites like this in 2016. In 2019, I'll bring up the story for you. In 2019, I think it was 105,000 sites. I apologize. I know I'm not my normal self here tonight. I'm still recovering. Yeah, 105,000 sites. So you can go read this story here. Fukushima contaminated soil, 2019. There are currently 105,000 sites. There's only about 1,000 pictures. We have about 1,000 official pictures. So I'm creating pictures of the one-ton bags. They're talking about storage sites for one-ton bags. And just let me quantify that assertion of 30 million one-ton bags. And this story is, you can read this one, is 2016. 30 million tons of radioactive waste. And they're talking about one-ton bags. And they're talking about the third interim storage facility near the crippled Diachi. They're talking about Nakuma. The bags deteriorate after 3 years. So the 30 million one-ton they're talking about are the one-ton bags. And so there was 150,000 sites bigger than this. Now the pictures of the bags I'm showing you are all my pictures that I made. And what I'll do is I'm going to show you a couple of the real pictures just to drive the point home, coming up in a second. And just get some random pictures, because we got all the pictures I could find of one-ton bags. Here we go. So these 4 pictures I'm going to show you are real pictures. So here's one picture. At this time there was 150,000 sites of one-ton bags, which is 30 million one-ton bags. And so this is up close look at the picture. Here's another picture. This is a picture of them growing food right alongside of one-ton bags in a nuclear wasteland. They call it a no-go zone, but this is a nuclear wasteland. There's another picture of growing food alongside of one-ton bags to ship to your supermarkets and murder you. The ambassador Murata writes to UN Secretary General, and again, the UN gets all this prominence, but they're the worst humans conceivable. They are the worst of the worst a human can offer. And so the ambassador said there's no exaggeration to say that the fate of Japan and the entire world depends on a number 4 reactor. So the fate of Japan and the entire planet depends on number 4 reactor. What about reactor 3? That's also gone. Reactor 4 was clearly gone. There's a stump of reactor 4. So the whole fate of the world depended on that reactor not melting down. But guess what happened? It melted down. And guess what they done? They came out and covered it up. Guess what Tepco is doing? They're covering up. Guess what United Nations humanity's worst enemy is doing. They're covering it up. So reactor 4, this is original footage. This is a couple of weeks later. And this contraption, this is a cement truck, is meant to pump cement, not water. And the viscosity of water and cement is totally different, right? The reactors typically need 4,500 tons every minute to keep them cool before they run away. When they run away at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, it doesn't matter how much water you put on it, you're going to atomize an aerosol, ionize and radiate it, and release it into the environment as a radioactive plume. So also at the same time as the United Nations came out in 2021, I showed you those headlines earlier, and said there was no adverse health effects and everything else. In January, Tepco, somebody in very high ranking at Tepco, put these pictures up on their website from a drone. And when you zoomed in, you see the reactors are pixelated. But up there in the corner is the common spent fuel pool, which is right behind reactor 4. And the incinerator is just a little further over right there. So when you look at the common spent fuel pool, renewed chain reaction feared at the spent fuel storage pool. So think about this statement. Another nuclear chain reaction feared. So what they're saying right there is that the common spent fuel pool melted down. That's sure evidence. This is unassailable stuff, by the way. This is the Japanese media, March the 20th, 2011, on day 9, saying that there was another nuclear meltdown at the common spent fuel pool. And so then when you look at the picture, why is the common spent fuel pool completely pixelated out? So these pictures were from a drone, but when you zoomed in, you've seen all this pixelation. And I was totally shocked. Now, the common spent fuel pool was being sprayed with water, contains 6,375 spent fuel assemblies. And because we do a lot of math around here, I can't remember what the math was on that. So let me bring up the calculator and do the math. Dana, that's not it, Dana. Oh, there it is. Oh, I gotta get rid of that, sorry. That's me. Okay, so 6,000, what was it? 6,375 assemblies, 375 times, each fuel rod is 18 pounds. There's 100 fuel rods in each assembly, so 1,800 pounds. I think it's 11 million pounds or something. Yeah, 11.5 million pounds. Which, that on its own makes Chernobyl look like a paper towel, right? So the inventories was 30 to 40 times as high as Chernobyl. But actually, it's infinitely worse than that because each reactor core was easily 100 Chernobyls because it was pure uranium, pure plutonium. These were massive reactors. And combined, they were one of the biggest running reactors on the planet at the time. A facility, rather. Because the industry will show up in the comments and say, well, no, Dana, they weren't. Yes, they were, you piece of shit. So, why is the common spent fuel pool pixelated out? Now, each of these buildings had an incredible inventories. It would be like Chernobyl on steroids, said one scumbag. If the spent fuel catches fire, says a nuclear engineer who worked at an identical plant, America has 70 of these identical plants. Each reactor, the boiling water Mark IV reactors, each reactor holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. Well, it's not reactor, it's reactor building, is what they meant by that. because they don't have a repository anywhere in Japan, let alone anywhere else on the planet, they keep the spent fuel in pools, and the boiling water Mark IV reactors, they're at the top of the buildings. And so spent fuel at each reactor unit, 3,450 typically, but a capacity is actually 8,300 assemblies. And because you don't have a repository, there's a good chance there's double of my estimates in the fuel pools. Because the reactors at that time were 70 or 40 years old. Let me see what we got down here. Yeah, I'm definitely not back to myself tonight. I apologize. I'm struggling a little bit tonight. I'll be back in fighting shape in another day or two, though. Yeah, this story is such a sad story. For one of the biggest sadness, besides the mass species extermination and humanity's extermination, is the betrayal of the academics, the universities, and the medias is absolute. It's 100% betrayal. The common spent fuel pool now being sprayed with water contains 6,375 spent fuel assemblies. The common spent fuel pool is completely pixelated out. So why would they pixelate it out if it was like a potato chips and bananas and walking in the sunshine and stuff like that? 88% of the cesium, of course, only acknowledging cesium should be a crime on its own. In radioactive ash, so the ash, most things are only measured with cesium, gamma, and the idea is to lull you into complacency. My Geiger counter is at 220 counts per minute. 220 counts per minute. $237 counts per minute. Only measures gamma, right? But for every gamma or cesium-137, there's 100 strontium 90s. 88% of the cesium radioactive ash might be at risk of being transported away from Japan's landfill by wind and rain. And where they were going to originally hold the Olympics in Japan, the bleachers were built on top of where the ashes were being stored from the incinerators they couldn't get rid of. The industry is so evil it thinks it's normal. It's normal for them, right, to be evil. They can't get a job there unless they're going to be absolutely evil. In Tokyo, which is 240 kilometers away, neighbor cesium approaching levels found in Fukushima. And at the Chiba, which is 20 kilometers away, incinerator dust was at 70,000 atoms a kilogram. This is a dirty bomb per kilogram we're talking about. And because you're only talking about cesium, those scientists should get the shit kicked out of them and lose their degrees and go to jail for the rest of their lives too. Radioactive dust reported in Tokyo after the fog. So after the fog, and to call it radioactive dust, I think, is a crime too. And the contamination never disappears. 4,000 atoms a kilogram of cesium. And cesium, of course, pulses energy 600 feet every second. Professor, Fukushima disaster beyond a cover-up. Japan government thinks they can get away with tricking the masses about the extent of the problem. Well, apparently they can. Officials in Tepco cannot be trusted because they're lying to the cameras. it's beyond a cover-up. I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million. And so you didn't pick up 30 million one-ton bags because it's harmless. The United States banned agricultural and fishery products from 14 prefectures. So it wasn't just Fukushima. It was all the northern prefectures, including Tokyo, by the way. Concern over contamination is spreading to most countries around the Pacific. Well, I mean, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and they're growing food in there. And which is only 3% of the land they're talking about in Fukushima Prefecture itself. And Fukushima wasn't the only prefecture where they picked up one-ton bags of radiation. They did pick up 30 million of them in just Fukushima Prefecture and 3% of the land only, where they wanted to move people back into it, that people, because they didn't want to pay them compensation, right? And so left all those people in those other communities I showed you because they didn't want to pay compensation. It's better to murder them the worst way possible by radiation sickness than it is to take money away from the shareholders. Korea bans all fishery products from 8 Japanese prefectures. Well, too little, too late, right? And so why would you just ban fishery products in the prefectures that had 30 million one-ton bags? How can you not ban all the food? How does that actually work? And they don't really got any opposition, see? And so you got all these public relation firms out there, and every one of them, I mean, they'll attack me for free. They don't need to be paid to attack me, but they are. And they're paid lots of money to get rid of me, but they can't get rid of me. And in many ways, let's pray they're stupid enough to kill me. Because that's about the only way the story will come out, right? So every nuclear plant is hemorrhaging radiation, by the way. Every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. Every nuclear power plant should pick up at least 100,000 one-ton bags of radiation each day within 50 square miles. All the topsoil within 1,000 square miles of a nuclear power plant anywhere on the planet should be dug up every single year because the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation, no containment, and everything is splitting atoms. Like, to work in this industry, you got to be evil beyond concept. And in South Korea, the public concern over Japan's fish imports look to be justified. Contaminated seafood recently on sale in Korea, 6 million pounds were found since 3/11. 6 million pounds. 6 million pounds. How's everybody doing there? Let me go back here. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. Just let me quick look over the comments here. Just in case somebody's yelling at me, Data, turn your audio up. That was the last show. I screwed up. Oops. Yeah, beware of deformed carrots, folks. Get rid of the whole bag if you get that stuff. Don said he lost my audio. I didn't see anybody else. Hopefully that got resolved. So, 6 million pounds, but Japan is saying nothing got out. Japan is saying it's fear-mongering. Japan is saying it's reputational damage. Hi, Dana Nasana. We love Dana around here, big time. She's an incredible friend of this show and this movement. Tepco allocates 500 million to compensate reputational damage from Fukushima discharges. Tepco allocates $500 million to keep fishermen to providing radioactive food to poison everybody on the planet is what it should be saying. Like, when you pick up 30 million one-ton bags and you don't call that a nuclear wasteland, you're a criminal. Tepco researchers say it's impossible to contain the radioactive wastewater. And calling it wastewater is no longer water. It's a nuclear dirty bomb by the leader. Leaking and suggesting the buildings are leaking when you picked up 30 million one-ton bags. When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags and you call it a leak, then we got to bring back the old days where you burned these monsters at the stakes as an incentive for the other monsters not to do it. Because the death penalty is legal in a lot of places, and we need to bring back an incentive so that this nuclear industry gets checked. Tepco researchers says it's impossible to contain the radioactive water. It's not water. It's not leaking. It's hemorrhaging. Japanese government has lost all credibilities. And so there was a lot of people speaking out in 2011, 2012, 2013, right? But within a couple of years, 2015 or so, it was pretty well silent for any dissenting voices. Seawater is being poisoned at a continuous rate from Fukushima. The source of which life on which our lives depend is being corrupted. Oh, it's so much worse than that now. When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation and suggest that nothing got out, you're talking about a whole different level of evil. And United Nations, can you imagine how evil United Nations actually is to promote lies like that? Here's another interesting story from 2011, no less. High radiation levels near Tokyo are linked to Fukushima. High radiation levels near Tokyo. Rain caused 29 million atoms a square meter in the soil, says the government. Of course, they're only looking for cesium-137. Unfortunately, honesty doesn't exist in the nuclear industry or in the academic world or in journalism anymore. It simply doesn't exist. High radiation levels, like 29 million atoms a square meter is not high level. That's, you're supposed to abandon Tokyo permanently. These are inconceivable numbers. We have nothing to compare that to pre-Fukushima. It's next level evil. Massive radioactive waste built up in Tokyo suburbs. First time centers are over capacity is 2012. What are you talking about? Like, you picked up 30 million one-ton bags just in Fukushima prefectures. But what they were doing in Tokyo, they were taking the radioactive soil at nighttime down to the coastline and dumping it in the oceans or dumping it in the rivers. And they've been doing that, and we have all kinds of the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants that don't speak the language, who were hired to do the jobs, talking about that. Well, that's what we always tell them with it. Right? They picked up probably 1 billion bags that got just dumped directly into the oceans and rivers. Fukushima disaster is the worst case of nuclear contamination in history. And it's a crisis for all of humanity. And it's building up to something much worse. These are words that should never be ignored. These were lone voices from the academic community in the dark trying to warn you. And I can provide you, I can go for weeks and weeks and weeks with this stuff. The pack rat that I actually am. Fukushima disaster to go on almost to infinity, I'm afraid. Former diplomat. Officials said it will never be resolved. if the situation at the plant continues. The Prime Minister told by his own party Japan's response is failing. Well, I mean, when you picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and then a decade later you're saying that nothing got out, and United Nations is the ones behind all of this, UNSCLEAR and IRPA and the IPRC and the IAEA have worked diligently to stab you in the back and cut your loved ones' throats by making sure they get poisoned. You're failing too. It's your responsibility too, not just mine. This world needs to, what I'm saying is to this world out there, if you're first time here, you need to fight back too. It's true that about 70% of Japan's territory is polluted by Fukushima radioactive fallout. Tokyo is contaminated with highly toxic radiation, and the experts are worried about a catastrophic impact on the health. Well, 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. I'm pretty sure that quantifies catastrophic. 14,200 children every 100,000 live births of neonates and infants in Japan across the entire country. 14.2%, 14,200 of the 100,000 live births need open heart surgery. These are numbers that nobody's ever conceived before. And the radioactive fallout isn't limited to Japan. The numbers in Canada and the United States are brutal. 220 million atoms, for instance, of iodine-129. And the models are much thicker than these models of neptunium-239, which decays to plutonium-238. They also got 239 plutonium dispersal models. Foreign reporter finds radiation levels over 100 times the legal limit off Fukushima. Captain, the radioactive releases may last until the end of Earth. And the deep sense of dread said, and don't stop, don't go any closer to Japan. The world deserves an honest assessment of the disaster, and that's what we bring you here. And despite all the attacks upon me and the relentless insults on me and the vicious, hateful propaganda put out against me, I don't lie. I don't make anything up because I run an educational program. You can't educate people. And the story is so horrible. I couldn't make up as horrible as this actually is. Who can make this stuff up? In fact, if somebody had wrote a Hollywood-type movie and produced it that told the truth about Fukushima before it happened as a science fiction movie, no one would have believed them. Because the nuclear industry has been really good for its decades of propaganda. But the industry was well aware this is what would happen. They knew this 80 years ago. This is what eventually is going to happen. And they covered it up so that you could never be in a position to understand it if it did happen. And the way I worked it out was methodically. I took my time for years and years and years, and I gathered up everything. And then I was always open to the truth, right? I've never rejected the truth. And so the truth gets incorporated into the official stories, because we tell the official story, not the propaganda story. Animals suddenly died on the West Coast right after 2011. Well, this plume model over there is plutonium-239. That's based on 20 days of radioactive fallout. But that model is only based on venting. It's not based on the actual inventories from the destroyed and missing reactors. Entire nuclear core injected into the environment. And that, the reactor 3, for instance. Reactor 3, when it detonated, I got a picture of the detonation. Here you go. And when you watch the videos, and I'm not going to look for it right now, but we played it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You can see the reactor core and the fuel pools falling back down. That's the detonation of reactor 3, the plutonium mixed oxide facility. Dead animals littered the California beaches. Graveyard of washed up sea life. Influx of emaciated sea creatures. The animals are starving to death, covered in sores, stunted growth, compromised immune systems. Tokyo-based writer, over 1 million Japanese still live in areas with high daily radiation exposure. It's not like you're getting, it's just like energy. You're breathing the atoms, the physical fuel particles and atoms in. You're drinking it. It's falling and landing on your food. It's when you get a wash, you're washing in it. When you do your laundry is covered in radioactive isotopes because your water is compromised permanently. And at the previous cesium, which is interesting when they say stuff like this, cesium, as if cesium's the only isotope. And I disrespect these people. There's nobody that deserves more disrespect than everybody in the nuclear industry. And particularly the public relation employees worldwide. What they've done to us is they made sure we can't have a future, and neither can them or their children or their loved ones. The worst humans imaginable are public relation. They're truly just the most degenerate, revolting, despicable, barbaric, monstrous, hideous, nefarious, just ghastly, vile, and hateful scum. It's horrifying, right? It's loathsome. It's offensive what they've done to us. The previous cesium limits in rice was 0.1 atoms a kilogram. That's 2012. And so now it's 100 atoms a kilogram of cesium, right? You hear the word cesium. Every time I hear the word cesium, I want to grab a nuclear scientist and yank all their teeth out. They're dumping huge amounts of Fukushima contamination into the Pacific. We could have large numbers of cancers, not just cancers, heart, liver, and lung, and respiratory, and pituitary, and thyroid, and adrenaline, and Alzheimer's, dementia, and autism, and diabetes, and Down syndrome. There's so many diseases, it's horrifying. I just think that there were so many people out there that could have broke. Imagine if a nuclear scientist came out, a prominent nuclear scientist, and he wrote a book and told the truth like I tell you. It's going to be the best seller ever, right? And so it's worth his time to do it. But if he does do it, it's going to be full of propaganda. That's what you're going to end up with. And it's going to be a bestseller. We've seen this over and over and over. And I've came out and viciously eviscerated these people in presentations, and they're still the top sellers. They're still the top selling books on the planet. You had 220 million atoms of iodine-129 per liter. That meant the whole planet was buried in it, sustained. Now this is forever. That's a forever isotope that wrecks the thyroid glands of insects and birds and mammals and animals. It's atrocious. It's inexcusable what they have done, and we have to be better than these people, hold them accountable. Rain with 20 million particles, not just atoms now, but we're talking about actual particles. Because it was ionized particles of the buildings, cement and steel and everything else was atomized and aerosol, ionized and radiated. And so 20 million particles of radioactive iodine-131 per liter falling on the United States. This is a study out of Ottawa, Canada, or British Columbia, Canada. This is a study out of Ottawa, Canada, 220 million atoms. And then 1 million of cesium-137 per square meter. At the time of landfall, per square meter of your whole continent. And so what you're looking at is every creature in the forest, meadows and communities, everything is full body X-rays. That's what this represents. Particularly like this one. Like you're talking about so much, you're talking about saturation of the thyroid glands of all species. Every species, humans included. The thyroid glands of all the birds and all the beetles and all the insects and all the mosquitoes and all the spiders and all everything, all the plants. It's an invasion is what it is. In an industry, technology that shouldn't exist because they can't contain it anyway. All the fuel pools full of reactor cores are still splitting atoms and there's no containment. That's all released directly into the environment 24/7 every single day. It's the most nightmarish industry that if you've done a Hollywood show and told a story nuclear didn't exist, for instance, right, and you made this up, you would freak this planet out. And so they keep you perpetually disrupted, right? There's always this war going on, there's this event, and then we got the jab routine that they done to you in 2020. Everything is meant to lull you into complacency. And we're very dedicated to the facts. We only deal with facts. And so when you only deal with facts, it's really easy to remember the truth because that's all we deal with. So when they tell you that nothing got out of the reactors, then the question you should say is, why is Dana showing us these pictures? And if I'm honest and these pictures are real, then everything else I told you is real too. And then you should be very concerned. And you should speak up. And it's heartbreaking we don't have a lot of people, or any people, showing this picture. There's no one shows this picture, only Dana. I created all, like these types of depictions. When I created these pictures, they were just so you could tell the story. And nobody does it. Nobody takes the stuff. I run an educational program and nobody takes it and teaches it to anybody else. And like if you take this picture, a screen capture, and print it out, and you bring it down to your local engineering firms in your little communities, you all got little engineering firms, and say, show me the fuel pool at the top of these buildings, they're going to laugh at you. But you should pay them the money and make them prove that the fuel pools are gone. Because now you've got somebody else that is capable of articulating. And eventually, some of these are going to start. We should have like an architect and engineer for Fukushima truth. Where they say there is no fuel pools. We haven't got a single nuclear engineer, nuclear academic on the entire planet that admits the fuel pools are gone, despite the fact clearly the fuel pools are gone. We've never had one on the entire planet come out that we found. And that's the most scariest statement conceivable. That is the most unimaginable statement in human history, is that nobody in the academic community has come out and said, hey, look, the fuel pools are gone, folks, and then explained it to you. That is the most frightening, terrifyingly fact in history. How did I do tonight? Did we get through this or what? How late was I to the show tonight, I wonder? Man, I had to start up a whole new session. We're almost an hour and a half. Well, we're an hour and a half in, I guess. That's pretty good. We'll call it that for tonight. If you make this fair, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Let's bring up the poll. I still need a bunch of sleep yet to catch up. Hopefully by tomorrow. So we got a lot of pictures from yesterday and videos, and we got 1,600 pictures and a bunch of videos from Friday. Should the cowardly nuclear scientists work at the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns instead of the homeless that have been working and dying there for 13 years? Nuclear scientists don't go to Fukushima. You're not going to find any nuclear scientists here we are at reactor 3 or reactor 4 or anything like that. After 13 years. And you got all the mouthpieces out there, right? Like Veritasium and the rest of them. And they're promoting, and what is it, Kyle Hill? There's a person I wouldn't mind dressing as a homeless and sticking in Fukushima and watching him friggin' die. He's a despicable, disgusting, parasitic monster, that feller. And big shout out to James Lucid, donated $200. And so his donation and Tabitha's goodies donation last week enabled us to do all kinds of research and a little bit to spare. And so I'm far from finished. And the information that we got is just heartbreaking. This is we're in an extinction event, period. And Fukushima was a pulse event, is what really tipped the scale, because you had 70 years of emissions from the nuclear industry, and then Fukushima. Fukushima was built on a fault line, where there's 1,000 earthquakes a year, and you're just 40 miles away from the tectonic plates that does that regularly throughout history. With a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis up to 300 feet tall, hitting that same spot. In fact, if you go up 300 feet into the hill, there's signs on the trails that says don't build homes below this point because of tsunamis. But yet they built these reactors on an active, unbelievably active fault line where they knew absolutely unequivocally there was going to be a catastrophic earthquake before the reactors ever shut down. And they put the fuel pools at the top of the buildings where there's no way to rescue the fuel. It was guaranteed to be lost. It was designed to do what it done. It was put in a place where it's geologically unstable and where you had a 3,000-year legacy of tsunamis that would get rid of the external power, and the reactors are dependent on external powers. They can't run on their own power. I know I'm starting to mumble now. Dana's mumbling. Nuclear scientists all over the country. Mom, Dana's mumbling. Bring down my milk and cookies. Now, and James created these songs. He's got a bunch of rap songs now up on his YouTube channel, by the way. Pretty awesome. But some of these songs now are stuck in my head, which is a good thing, by the way. But they're going to be stuck in your head, too, because I like them. So I'm going to give you that Calm Down Charlie song again tonight. So you can, little disgusting parasite Calm Down Charlie, who's been stalking me for over a decade. He used to call into every show 8, 10, 12 times. Finally, I blocked him. He said, "What you got me blocked for?" And I was pretty sure you're a troll, you scumbag. Oh. So I'm using copper mugs for water. Copper is really good with water, right? It helps realign your structure. It turns it into structured water. And if you put ice in that, I put ice in it. I fill it up with half of ice and a little drop of water over the ice, so that when I put it in the freezer, that whole it becomes like a clump. And when you put water in there, it's so cold. Okay, I guess I better give it up. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Now, I'm not sure if I'm doing pictures tomorrow night, but I will have the card loaded up in case. I'm reading a bunch of stories they got this week on Fukushima, and I want to start covering die-offs because we're starting to do more research finally. I've been sick all summer, but I'm definitely coming around. And I had Charlie horses on. When I was getting the day before Saturday, I had Charlie horses in the back of both legs. I was working hard, right? And I was doing a bunch of welding too, so I was in all kinds of awkward positions. I had Charlie horses in the back of my legs, top part, and then the front of my legs, and then my arm. All in the period of about an hour and a half. They subsided and went away eventually, but I never was in good shape, right? I got hurt as a commercial diver and got taken out. Alrighty, I can only ramble so much longer. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.